Hi, everybody. Hi, Alan.
Hey, John.
Thank you for joining us. We were talking upstairs a bit. That was a lovely introduction, by the way. So you know everything you need to know about both of us. So most of you can probably just leave.
Yeah.
Because it's going to get wonky, and we're going to talk about TV for a while. Which is exciting. And I was talking with Alan upstairs a little bit, and you can probably say exactly what you said to me up there, but we were talking about what a great time it is to be alive if you like television. Very important caveat.
Yes.
And as some of you may or may not know, this is my local bookstore, and Alan has been a friend of mine for 10 years?
Whenever Mad Men started.
About 10 years. And the kind of journey that we both have taken over the last 10 years, Alan as a critic and myself as an actor, owe a significant debt to basically this one show and what happened and how it sort of changed television. I don't want to say that, but like how television changed around it.
Yeah.
And the sort of growth industry of television writing has become enormous, and it's again, if you're a fan of television, you get to read what really smart people think about some pretty cool stuff, and it's everywhere now. I was telling Alan I was driving down Sunset the other day, and there's that whole kind of canyon that's all billboards and outdoor advertising that used to be movies. You used to watch, oh, that's coming out. Okay, cool, I like them. Or, wow, that guy's still alive. And now it's all television shows. And very few of them are on even networks.
Yeah, no, and pretty much all of that can be pinned to you and a handful of other people.
You're welcome.
Yes.
But so, talk a little bit about, or tell me a little bit about, in what we were talking about there, like how has it changed, and where's it going, do you think?
All right, so I've been doing this since 1996. That's a long time now. And when I started, there were like 5 broadcast networks, no, 6. There was UPN and the WB, neither of which exist anymore. PBS did a couple shows. There was not, other than like Larry Sanders, there were no cable shows at the time. So it was like, ER was sort of the highest that TV could aspire to, and ER was a really good show, but, in terms of the level of artistry of a Mad Men or a Breaking Bad or some of the other things we've seen now, it wasn't allowed to do things like that, because it was aiming for a bigger audience. And then the TV audience kind of kept fracturing, and you had HBO and then FX and then AMC all coming in and saying, well, we're not going to worry as much about getting the biggest audience possible. We're just going to make the best show possible and hope enough people come in to make it profitable for us.
And they did.
Yes. And so, first you had The Sopranos, then, a few other HBO shows. Then you had The Shield on FX, which showed that HBO wasn't the only one who could do this. Anyone with sort of the right talent involved and the right commitment to it, they could make their own Sopranos, more or less. And then AMC came in with this show about advertising, and like, who wants to watch a show about advertising?
Well, 30-something, you guys.
All right, touche, John Hamm, touche.
Well, yeah, and for a long time, and you probably know this as well, but that was considered a terrible idea to make a show about making a show, or make a show about advertising, because there's no stakes. You're not a doctor, you're not a cop, you're not a lawyer. No one's going to die. No one's going to. If the life campaign doesn't work, no one's going to die. Just people will eat less cereal. So there was thought that that's an impossible thing to get people to come watch.
Yeah.
And then we had and in fact in the story of Mad Men, which I think was in your previous book.
Yes.
But was shopped around and nobody wanted it. And Matt Weiner famously wrote the script, and it over a series of years, and it sat around because everyone was like, "It's never going to work."
He was writing on staff at The Sopranos, and HBO didn't want it.
Yeah, and we were incredibly fortunate. We got it made basically on a shoestring during the hiatus between the last 2 seasons of The Sopranos.
Yeah,
because Matt was still writing on The Sopranos, and this thing came out that no one knew what to do with. It was produced by AMC Networks and a company called Radical Media, which was an advertising agency, who then didn't want to put forth the financing to do it, and then Lionsgate bought it. And again, no one wanted to buy it. Lionsgate came in at the last minute, and we're like, well, I guess we'll take it. We'll see what happens. But again, this is in a landscape that's was then unproven.
Yeah.
And now they're giving 14-episode orders to kids right out of college that had an idea and have a two-camera setup.
Yeah, I mean, you came on, it was the Wild West. The Sopranos had ended a month before, and The Wire was wrapping up, and 6 Feet Under was gone, and a lot of sort of the early 2000s trailblazing shows that I wrote about in the Revolution was televised were done. And it's like, oh, well, maybe this was just an anomaly in TV history, and things will go back to the way they were, and, like complicated characters you can't do, and it's just like, at worst, someone will be, what's the line from Network? Crusty but benign? You can have...
My nickname in high school.
Yes. You can have edge, but only so much. And then along comes Don Draper, who is, looks like Gary Cooper, but, is complicated like Tony Soprano. And, Don is not really a good guy, but the audience loved that show. And that then made room for AMC to also do Breaking Bad.
Sure. Another show that was passed on by
FX,
several people.
They talked about it today at the TV Critics Press Tour I was at. FX just didn't want to do another male anti-hero show, and so they passed on it, and it wound up elsewhere. And suddenly,
what happened, though?
Well,
I haven't seen the show. It's excellent.
See, Walter White.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I was kidding.
Yeah,
It really is the Wild West now. And talk a little bit about you were just here at TCA for, what's it like there now? Because it's got to be just like, here's 150 new things that we expect you to watch, and good luck.
It's almost oppressive. Like, it's really, like, it used to be a very manageable job. You could have one person at a newspaper back when there were still newspapers covering the TV beat, and you could keep track of pretty much everything. Even shows I didn't like that much, I would watch a handful of episodes a year, just on the off chance that suddenly they would do something good. And now it's just there's no time to keep up with all of the shows that I like. There were over, I think, 500 original scripted shows in prime time in 2016. And so I'm getting ready for TCA, which is the Television Critics Association press tour event where I first met this guy. And in the run-up to it, we keep getting these emails because almost no one sends DVD screeners anymore, except, ironically, Amazon, which is a streaming service. Yes. Everyone else, it's just like they send you an email with a link. And so I started keeping tabs, and just over the course of December, as we're getting ready to come out here, I just kept running tab of a number of episodes of television I was being given to watch for the month of January and into February, and just a handful of other things for TCA, and it was over 200 episodes of TV just to prep for this event. And so I would just sort of cross things off, and they're giving us full seasons of things, and and then the worst is when you like something, because then they sent me 13 episodes of the new One Day at a Time on Netflix. I figure I'll watch 2 episodes of it and move on. I watched all 13 because it was so good, and then you're frustrated because you don't have time for 17 other things.
You're behind in your queue, so to speak.
It should never be a good thing when you're slightly relieved something's bad. Because that's not good for the job. But, I mean, Andy Greenwald is here in the front row. You felt that, haven't you, Andy?
It's too much.
Yes, it's way too much. And so suddenly it's like, oh, this show isn't good. Oh, well, that's one less thing I have to set the DVR for.
Cross it off and moving on.
Exactly.
So where do you think it's going then? Because it seems we've reached critical mass.
Yeah.
Peak television, as the phrase goes. But they're not going to stop making it. And there's going to be more streaming services, and it's never been easier to watch TV because we can watch it on our phones in our pockets while we drive. Please don't do that anymore. I've seen 4 people do that, and it's raining out there, and it's very dangerous. But it's never been easier, but it's never been more impossible in the ways that you describe.
We at Uprocks we do this television critics poll, and we ask about 50 or 60 TV critics around the country, give us your 10 best shows of the year and your 10 best new shows, and we'll add them up and we'll see what the critical consensus is. And I start looking at the ballots. There's shows I haven't heard of, and it's my job to watch TV. So, feel for the people who are like just trying to find good stuff, or worse, the people who are doing good stuff and nobody can find it.
Right, because it's just buried under an avalanche of other things.
But it really, like, if you look...
Stranger Things, maybe.
If you look at, like, what AMC was before you, it was the second-rate, like, classic movie channel that nobody liked because they had commercial interruptions and their library wasn't as good as TCM.
Right. It was what you watched when you didn't have TCM.
Yes, or you just needed to watch The Godfather for 5 minutes. Then before the commercial interruption. Then along comes Don Draper, and suddenly, they're one of the high-class places on TV. And, like, you put that channel on the map. And, The Shield put FX on the map. And that's the thing now. It's like, as people are trying to get noticed, whether it's a channel or a streaming service or, like, a video game console that's starting its own entertainment network, which is a thing that's happening. Like
PlayStation Network? What is it?
Yeah, PlayStation Network. They did, I think, Powers, which was a comic book show. Wow. Yeah. And it's just like, that's the way you get noticed, is you do a show, and, like... In theory, people like me write good enough things about it that someone says, oh, I have to get a PlayStation, or I have to subscribe to Amazon to watch Transparent, or, I have to make sure my cable system has Sundance so I can watch Rectify.
Right. Well, talk a little bit about the kind of arrival and then explosion of blog culture as well.
Yeah.
And what happened... that's another way that Alan and I got to know one another, is I would read his blog, not only on my show, because I'm a horrible narcissist, but on all the other shows that I liked, because I kind of wanted to have what we used to call like water cooler discussions. Yep. And it became a check-in, like what did Alan think? Yep. And you would read the thing, and then you'd read the comments, and unlike most comment sections, it was a mostly civilized place where people had often hilarious discussions.
And they were usually smarter than me and figured out stuff that I didn't.
And often, and the great thing about doing it for my own show is that I knew what was going to happen, and watching people try to kind of guess and figure it out, and very few people getting it. But a lot of people having cool ideas.
Yeah. Don's Jewish, that sort of thing.
I remember that one had a lot of...
That had legs.
That one had legs, yeah. And the certainty. The internet certainty is my favorite thing. Like, no, he's a Jew. Yeah. Fatty69 says it, so...
Yeah, internet fan theories are the worst. And what's bad is right now we got a number of shows that basically live to feed internet fan theories. So it emboldens everyone to think of like a TV show as a puzzle to be solved when that's not in theory the way you should be watching.
Well, it's a way to watch.
It's a way. It's just it's not my favorite way, certainly.
But talk about having that kind of, I don't want to say it's like a secondary career other than being a television career, but now you're sort of like a blog star, blog presence. And is that, are those things now kind of inseparable in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I had started, some of you probably know the story, but I was in college when NYPD Blue was on. That was a great ABC cop show in the 90s with Dennis Franz and Jimmy Smits.
Holds up, by the way.
It does.
Still very good. I watched an episode in preparation for this. Not at all. I was lazy. It was on like the Audience Network or something.
Heroes and Villains, I think, whatever
maybe that was it.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievably good. The writing was unbelievably good.
Yeah.
Like Milch and Bochco, right?
Yeah, Milch and Bochco.
It was, check it out if you haven't seen it. It's worth it. NYPD Blue.
So
Dennis Franz, Jimmy Smits.
Yeah. So I'm obsessed with this show. I'm a college sophomore in West Philadelphia. It's not really like the speed of the average undergrad at Penn. And so I couldn't find anybody to talk about it with me. But there was this thing called the internet, and we had just all gotten email accounts, and I went on Usenet, which was the old version of online message boards, where I met my friend Des, who's sitting in the second row there, and I had to go there to find people who cared about the stuff I did. And one night someone said, "Hey, I missed this week's episode of NYPD Blue. What happened?" And I wrote a little recap of it in the middle of the night because I didn't want to study for finals. And people said, that was awesome. And these were people, most of whom had seen the episode already. They just liked hearing about it again. And I said, that's interesting. And I did it the next week and the next, and I kept doing it. And that's eventually how I got my job at the Star-Ledger. And then I went away from it for a while, and I was just a traditional newspaper TV columnist, and I would review things before they debuted. But we were the hometown paper of The Sopranos, and so there was always a demand for us to write about that show. And eventually, after a while, I would start when a character died or when they did something big. I would say, all right, I'm going to come in and Monday morning I'll write a column for the Tuesday paper about what just happened last night. And those always got such a bigger reaction than anything I wrote about a show before it premiered, even if it was a returning show that people loved, that was huge. And like, people like to talk about the stuff they've already seen. And so finally, in like 2005, I was just bored one day, and I said, I'm going to go back to doing what I did in college, and I'll start up a blog, which was a thing that now had a name. And so I basically, like you said, it was a second job that nobody was paying me to do that was eating up at least as much time as the newspaper column, and I started doing it, and eventually the two merged.
Well, and you had, I guess, this amazing generation of writers that you were sort of at the forefront too, between you and Maureen Ryan and Tim Goodman and Matt Zoller Seitz and like all these, and James Pony Wozik, like all these guys that are guys and girls, whatever, people, who really started digging in to kind of theory about television and television criticism,
and writing about it in lots of different ways. So Panawazik, can write about sort of the political meaning of something in a way that I really can't, and I can get at really like the nuts and bolts of why this worked and why this didn't, and really like with Mad Men go into theme and things like that, and really dig deep. And so there's just, what was discovered was there's so many different ways to write about television. And a lot of my favorite writers these days are people who write in a way that I never could and look at it through a lens that I just can't, and it's so exciting.
And you're I think this sort of rising tide has lifted all boats, and in many ways we talked about it a little bit upstairs, but in many ways we have this kind of strange inversion of the television and the film worlds, where film is pretty much at this point about repurposing intellectual property to make something into a franchise, like Winnie the Pooh, but it's an action series.
He's got a machine gun.
He's like angry Winnie, or someone's going to make this movie, I guarantee you. But that machine has kind of turned into what used to be like network television, like reach the most. Money's no object, and released the broadest version of it. And what happened in the 70s in the film, where film was considered to be like cool and artsy and edgy, and you could do things that were weird and off the that's TV now. And the writers are writing about the cool things and the interesting things, and that's TV now. And you told a story about somebody who went from...
All right, so Graham Yost, he did the show called Justified on FX that ended a couple of years ago. Graham Yost, he started out writing for Nickelodeon sitcoms and for Full House. Like, I think he wrote for Hey Dude in the 90s. And then he goes and he writes the screenplay for Speed and a couple of other really high-profile movies, and suddenly he's a big movie star guy. And all of his old sitcom writer friends would come to visit him at his new office and say, Graham, tell us what it's like in the movies, Graham. Is it, you really get to tell stories, don't you? Then 10 years later, he's done some HBO miniseries, and he's finally at FX, and he's doing Justified, and now all of his screenwriter friends are saying, Graham, tell us what it's like in TV, where you really get to write about characters and tell stories for grown-ups, and it's like within 5 or 6 years, it completely flipped.
The total inversion of that, I think, is really fascinating, and I think you're starting to see it even from my side of the business too, the talent side.
It's okay. You can say you're the talent. You are.
Where you have, Julia Roberts doing a television show. And, people we considered, the whole point back in the old days was just to get on TV so then you could be in movies. And now it's like, just get on TV. Like, that's where you want to be.
And there was this transitional period where people like Glenn Close would start doing it, and we would say to them when they would do these TCA press conferences, why are you doing TV? You're a movie star. And now that's pretty much gone away. Like, they don't even sort of ask the perfunctory version of it. It's just assumed TV's awesome.
And for the most part it is. And it's again, from my side of it, it's the idea of getting to do something that isn't going to be sort of marketed before it's released into these tiny little segments, and it has to be a 4-quadrant appeal, and it has to have all this stuff. And they come to a writer or creator or somebody and say, "What's your idea? Let's do it." And there's one meeting generally. Like, okay, you want to do what we want to do? Hire the best people and let's go make it, and let's get it out in front of as many people as we can. And what ended up happening too, I think, is that you mentioned it briefly, but the idea of generating revenue, there was a different model in some way, because it used to be the most eyeballs wins.
Yes.
There was one number, the Nielsen number. That's the thing, and that metric doesn't work anymore. Because we don't watch it in the same way anymore.
So, like at your old home base at AMC, they've got a show called *Halt and Catch Fire*, which is about the dawn of
excellent television.
Yes, the computer age. Nobody watches it. It is the lowest rated show in the history of AMC. It's one of the least watched shows in the history of television. It's going to run 4 seasons because AMC owns the show, and therefore they can make a lot of money selling it to Netflix and other places.
Right.
And sort of like that's the new... It's not so much about the initial run. It's about owning something and having it in a library so you can make money off of it forever.
Yeah, it's creating content, owning the content, and all of that. And what also ended up happening, and I read an article about this, it's funny you talk about like the beginnings of the show and of Mad Men and watching what we used to have, like boner pills and like that headache stuff that you put on your forehead, directly on the forehead. Those were our ads the first season of Mad Men. It was like the weird Extends guy who's super happy, and you're like, ugh, what are you eating? And then the second season, it was Heineken and Mercedes-Benz. And
by the last season, it's all ads narrated by you.
And then, now it's, maybe go to H&R Block if you have a chance. I don't know. Get your taxes won. So that started happening, and again, we were being told that we were hemorrhaging money and we were losing money. We had to cut our everything and blah blah blah. But an article came out about how the new kind of paradigm on what advertisers are willing to pay.
Yeah.
And because of DVRs, and because of another thing that didn't exist back in the old blog writing days, because of the internet, this Nielsen number was getting less and less relevant. And what took its place was this thing called a CPI, or something, a cultural penetration index. Publicis came up with this, which, if you don't know what Publicis is, it's a massive conglomeration of massive advertising agencies. And they do wonderful work. But they came up with this new metric. And season 2 or 3 of our show, which was very low rated, never got the big numbers, the big things, our CPI was second in the country to American Idol. So it went like American Idol, Mad Men. And 30 million people a week watched American Idol, and 2 million watched ours. But people talked about it in the same way.
Yeah.
And that became the new currency. And I think we have you to thank for that. Not exclusively, don't get me wrong.
I'm not going to get a big head here.
Or blame, whatever.
No, and also just like, again, it put AMC on the map. I mean, the original idea for doing the show was they needed an excuse. They needed a show that would make customers complain to the cable company if the cable company tried to drop AMC.
Right.
And so once they had you, they were sort of invulnerable, and it gave them freedom to do lots of other things, and now they have The Walking Dead.
Another show they own.
Yes.
Lock, Stock.
And they make a lot of money off of that.
They certainly do. They've told us all about that. Looking toward the future, what do you think? What do you think is coming? Like, I talked about it a little bit before, but like, are we gonna have? Is it gonna crash and burn? Are we gonna?
It seems like it's unsustainable. It just seems, because again, there's too many shows. When even I can't keep track of all the things that exist, something has gone awry. But at the same time, like, everyone keeps rushing into the business, and they need these shows to get noticed in the first place. So, I don't know. At a certain point, it feels like the bubble has to deflate at least a little bit.
Sure.
But, Netflix alone keeps, like, producing 80 shows, 90 shows a year. So...
Well, so I'll put it to you this way. What do you hope? What do you hope it looks like in the future?
I mean, just selfishly, I hope it's a little bit more manageable. But that's entirely selfish, because one of the great things now is that, like, there's a perfect show for everyone out there. If you in this group right now can't find a show that you love, you're not looking hard enough, because there's something for like every taste and everything. But What I want to see is maybe, like right now we're in a transitional period thanks to the streaming networks where you hear a lot of talk of like, oh, we're not making a TV show, we're making a 10-hour movie, we're making a 13-hour movie. Which, like, if you actually were to sit in a theater and watch a 10-hour movie, that's kind of terrible. That's That's not a sustainable thing. So people are, like, they're figuring out how to tell stories in this way where it's going to be binged over a weekend and how to structure it, and nobody quite has... Not enough people have licked that yet, and so I want to see a little bit more quality control there.
Gotcha. Speaking of quality,
sure.
Let's share with some of the people here some of your favorites of the last television season.
Okay.
We can talk about the one we talked about upstairs, which is both of our favorite. One of our.
Oh yes. All right. So there's a show on Amazon. It's a UK import called Fleabag.
So good.
Yes. So good. Yeah. So Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a young British actress and playwright. She did this as like a play in a fringe festival, and someone saw it and said, all right, you're going to make it for the BBC now. And it starts off, it's basically like, you think, oh, it's British Girls. It's like a sex farce about a young woman who sort of can't like control all her worst impulses. And then...
it gets weird.
And beautiful too, and dark, and like you'll cry by the end of it.
It's seriously for me it was a revelation. I was really so pleasantly surprised and shocked. And again, a show that would have never been on television 10 years ago, even. Or what is Amazon television?
Amazon. I watch Amazon on my TV.
So do
television,
but yeah, okay.
There you go.
All right. What's another one?
Let's see, Atlanta, the Donald Glover FX show.
Congratulations,
Great.
Multiple Golden Globe winning Donald Glover.
Donald Glover, or like today, the FX announced that like Atlanta won't even be back this year because he's off playing Lando Calrissian. So Donald Glover in one season of TV now has the Louis C.K., Larry David, you'll continue your show whenever you feel like it deal, which is pretty sweet.
That's an interesting topic I think we can touch on a little bit too, because when you look at what someone like Donald has done, or Aziz in some ways, what this expanding landscape has provided are voices for people who previously have not really been represented much in, not only in televised culture, but culture in general.
Sure.
Other than on the sort of specialty networks or channels or whatever.
I mean, if you look at something like Transparent, which is a show about a transgender woman,
it's a show about a trans parent.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a play on words.
I think I might have just gotten that.
Yeah. So Jeffrey Tambor on that show plays a character that 10 years ago would have been like a guest star in an episode about how like
a very special episode.
Yeah, the cis hetero like hero of the show comes to grips with the fact that their friend is transitioning. Yes. And 10 years before that, it would have just been a joke. And now it's like it's told from her point of view, very sensitively, very thoughtfully. I mean, Orange is the New Black alone has like 50 kinds of characters you hadn't seen on TV before.
Yeah, and I think that's another example of the rising tide kind of lifting all boats. And it's there's probably an argument to be made about how that's been shown in our current political climate, but I will leave that for another conversation.
Again, it's a good time to be alive if you like TV.
If you like TV, don't go outside at all. Just stay
and only watch certain kinds of TV. Stay away from the news channels.
Yeah, which in many ways have become more fictional than television. It's kind of awesome how we got here. That said,
yes. Another new show I like, or relatively new show, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Aww. I'm in that one.
I did the math on the way over here. You are in between the shows in the top 100 and shows mentioned elsewhere. You appeared at least once in 8 different shows in TV the Book.
8%. A gentleman's F.
Including an episode of Gilmore Girls where it's just about how boring you are.
Yeah. Lorelai was like, no, I'm good. I offered her tickets to a David Bowie concert, and she said no. Oh, boy. If
she'd only known.
If she only knew. Well, should we open it up to these nice people so they can ask you questions? Or do you...
I don't know. Do you guys have questions?
All right. Here's a question.
So how do you decide, or who decides what you write about? Do you get to choose? Does somebody else choose?
It's mostly me choosing. I've been doing this long enough and am sort of held on high enough esteem by my employers that they trust my taste and trust that I know, like, if I'm interested in writing about it, my readers are going to be interested in reading about it, which is good, because earlier in my career at the newspaper, it's like, there would always be an editor, not even from the feature section, who would come in and say, "I just saw this, this Ice Road Trucker show. I want Alan to write about that. That's going to be big." And it was a big hit. It's just not the kind of thing I was into. So it's nice to be able to pick and choose.
What do you got against Ice Road Truckers, man?
I have nothing against Ice Road Truckers.
Sounds like you got something against Ice Road Truckers. Yes.
How has social media changed the landscape of your job?
It's changed it a lot, both because I'm more readily able to communicate with people. When I was just a newspaper columnist, I would occasionally get a handwritten letter from someone who liked something I had done, and now the feedback is instant. Plus, it's much easier to interact with the people making the shows and being on the shows. And sometimes that can be negative if you're saying something bad about their show. There are certain creators who maybe once liked me and now don't, and maybe blocked me on Twitter, and that's just the way they roll, and that's okay.
Yeah. Is it? Does the good outweigh the bad? And that does it become? Does having that kind of access or having that kind of feedback become overwhelming or distracting?
It's not distracting. In a way, it's been kind of good, and it's gone sort of hand in hand with just me getting older. Because one of the things when you're a young critic, your favorite thing in the world to do is just to write the scathing,
Sure.
I'm going to rip the shit out of this show. How dare it be? How dare you be bad? I'm going to just make fun of you for 800 words. And that's sort of juvenile, I think. And so as you grow up, but also as you start interacting with the people making the show, you put brakes on that, and it doesn't make you be more positive about a thing you don't like, but it makes you be negative in a less obnoxious way.
Nicer.
Yes.
You got nicer.
Yes.
More
mature.
Nice. Yes.
What did you learn about writing or about television from co-writing a book with Zoller Seitz?
It was just, Matt and I worked together at the Star Ledger for 10 years. He was there before I arrived, and we worked together, and we were great partners, and one of the reasons we did this book was just as an excuse to get together again. Matt's a better writer than me. He would dispute that, but he's a better writer than I am, just in terms of pure prose styling. And so it was always so exciting, when we had a Google Doc that we shared as we were working on the book, and suddenly I would open it up one day, and suddenly, there's 1,000 words on the Larry Sanders Show by Matt, and I'm reading it going, oh my God, I love what he says about it. There's an essay towards the back of the book about The Good Wife, where in one paragraph, he made me understand the Juliana Margulies character much better than I ever had over 7 seasons of watching it. So
She was a really good wife.
She was okay.
Yeah,
she was good at other things.
Yeah, I saw the show. She's
Yeah.
a really good wife.
So it was fun to read his thoughts and to see sort of the way he was writing. It was great. Des.
So if you hadn't written the book with Matt, how much higher up would you have placed A-Shots on your list?
Okay, how much? Des and I met on a homicide listserv in the 90s. That's how far back we go. Which we called The Box, which was the name of the interrogation room on that show. I think we both liked Homicide a lot. If you were to look in the index, I don't think his score is appreciably different than mine. So that finished somewhere in the top 30, 35 or so, and that's probably where it would have been anyway.
That's a good one to talk about when you talk about network shows that tried really hard
Yeah.
to do something different, and how hard it was to do anything different.
Yeah,
and that was an incredibly talented group of people that worked on that show.
Andre Brower, and it was based on a book by David Simon, who wrote for the show later, and
Tom
obviously did The
Fontana.
Wire.
These were all huge. I can't remember all of the producers on that, but there was a
Barry Levinson,
wildly talented group of people.
And if you watch the first,
and the show it holds up tremendously. Another one we're gonna send you all away with a bunch of reading. We're gonna meet back here in a week.
Yeah. One of the reasons we wrote the book was also because people tell us all the time, what do I want to watch? How can I find something? And because you have access to most of the greatest shows ever made at a push of a button, we're here, take this book and you can find something.
Yeah.
But with Homicide, it was interesting because for the first 13 episodes or so of that show, That's about as good as network television drama has ever been. And then slowly but surely, like NBC kind of chipped away at what made it special in order to try to make it more successful. And it never really worked, and it was never a big hit, but it was always sort of more generic and prettier.
Yeah, it became a camel designed by committee, or whatever they say, a horse by committee.
And suddenly, like, there's helicopter chases, and, Clark Johnson's
Keep going.
Clark Johnson's partner is now a former beauty queen, things like that.
Sure.
So...
talk a little more about in the social media aspect. Do you think social media and then the direct communication with kind of both sides from the viewer to the creator? Do you think like this idea of sort of fan service has been?
It can be tough. I think I certainly have interacted with showrunners who said, like, I made a mistake. I was responding too much to sometimes something that I had written or just something they were seeing on Twitter or whatever. Like, literally, a creator has blamed me for killing off a character on the show who was beloved by the audience who I didn't like. So...
but yeah, like, so it's almost like Twitter has taken the place of sort of weird network notes.
Exactly. But, like, okay, so Matt Weiner, I'm assuming, was never on Twitter.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And thank God.
Yeah, so Matt, David Chase, a few other of the creators of the great shows really shun all of that stuff and are just, I'm going to do what I want to do because I have a creative compass and I trust it and I don't want to hear what anybody else has to say. But then there are others who are out there and really listening, and sometimes that can be useful. Sometimes, like, if you're doing something wrong, like if you think this character is sympathetic and everyone hates them, that can be useful feedback. If you think this is a mystery and everyone's figured it out already, that can be useful feedback. But for the most part, I kind of I don't like creativity by committee. I want a show made by someone and they know what they're doing. And sometimes it's just going to be a mess, and that's the price of it.
Well, and no one sets out to make bad television.
Yeah.
No one puts pen to paper or stares at an empty screen and goes, you know what, I'm going to make a terrible TV show. Average and boring and dumb that no one's going to like. I mean, everyone's like, no, this is going to be great. It's going to be great.
This is going to be a show about two guys who cross-dress to get jobs as farmer girls because of the man session. It's going to be awesome.
Amazing.
This was an actual show.
It was called Bosom Buddies.
No, Work It.
Oh.
Bosom Buddies, they were cross-dressing because they needed a rent-controlled apartment.
Because that's what you do.
Yes.
When life brings you rental issues,
yes,
you make an incredibly difficult lifestyle choice to solve them.
A piece of IP soon to be turned into an action movie.
Or a musical.
Yes.
Again, two ideas that will probably be pitched tomorrow morning somewhere. Yes.
Can you talk about how nothing really dies, or at least everything comes back?
Yeah, I mean, that's a definite thing that really changed. Like, there was a long time where I would always a show got canceled, a beloved show, and I would get all these emails and calls and things saying, can we bring it back? Can we bring it back? And I would just say, no, it's not coming back. It's not the way it works. Now everything comes back, because one of the ways in which people are dealing with the glut of the crippling amount of choice is you come up with a familiar brand, or ideally a familiar brand with the familiar people involved. So you get a little Gilmore Girls revival, or Fuller House, or X-Files, or sometime this year Twin Peaks, and hopefully that becomes easier for someone who's struggling to find something to watch to say, oh, I know that, I remember DJ Tanner, and I'm gonna go over there now. So, but it's hard, I think.
Well, even the idea of getting a television show canceled and that being the end of the line.
Yes.
Like, I remember that was like the world's worst thing that you could ever hear as an actor or a writer or a producer. It was like, you're canceled, because it means you're done. Now it means, well, you probably, if it was good enough or enough people liked it, or people send light bulbs in, Friday Night Lights can go from NBC to DirecTV. Yep. And Longmire can go from, XYZ to CBS.
Yeah, Community can go to Yahoo Screen for a season and then ultimately be responsible for the utter failure of all of Yahoo Screen. So weird things happen sometimes. But all I know is I want the Deadwood movies to happen. And we're still waiting.
Like now. We have the first one we're going to show.
Okay. All right. 10 years from now, AMC calls you up, says we want to do 80s, the actual 80s Don Draper, not the Twitter feed. What do you say?
I say no, thank you.
That's a very smart choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also it's an interesting thing, and Matt Weiner would talk about it when he talked about Mad Men. He says, I want this to have an ending. I want this to end.
Yeah.
Because, like every one of these books in here, it's there's a satisfaction in turning the final page and being like, it's done. And now I'm going to go read another one and look at another one.
And also, I mean, I think like TV's kind of alchemy, and the great shows are made in a specific time, in the lives of the people making it, in the lives of the people watching it, in the lives of the country in which it airs.
Yeah.
And like you sort of port it into the present. And even if all of the same people are involved, it's never going to be the same. You know, Gilmore Girls, where Alexis Bledel is an adult, is not Gilmore Girls, where she's a teenager. X-Files in the age of the internet is not, the X-Files in the 90s.
In the age of Mythbusters.
Yes, exactly.
You could just ask the Mythbusters guys and be like, is this real? And they're like, oh, let's check it out. And Scully, Mulder, it turns out they're not. They're not aliens.
All right, I think I saw a hand towards the back somewhere. Yeah, right back there.
Be loud.
So, you had talked about how cable TV provided sort of an initial breeding ground for premium TV. But as more and more people start cutting the cord, especially the kind of people who watch premium TV, where does that take you? I mean, is it easy to discover a whole bunch of new shows when everyone is subscribing to like 12 different streaming options instead of one?
It's hard, and like no one's watching the same thing. No one is watching the same thing on the same schedule. But also, when you cut the cord, you're sort of taking away a revenue stream from the business that gives you the shows that you enjoy.
Right.
And if like cable had been a la carte, like in the days before Mad Men, AMC probably would have ceased to exist.
Sure.
AMC only stuck around because of the cable bundle, so everyone had to subscribe to it, and they got subscription fees. And therefore, it was around long enough for Josh Sapin to say, let's go find a script, and they found it, and then they find this guy over here. No, that's you, Joe Hamm.
Oh.
Yes. Shows, people say, I'm going to wait for the show to be on Netflix or wait for the show to be on Hulu and I can binge it. But sometimes what happens then is the ratings are not high enough for it to survive to that point. So, yeah, Terriers is a great example of that. That's this show that was on FX, Private Eye show with Donal Logue, Michael Raymond James. That was just wonderful.
Ted Griffin wrote that, right?
Yeah, Ted Griffin wrote that.
Yeah.
Nobody watched Terriers. And I see in Ted Griffin and Sean Ryan's Twitter feed, a few of you in the audience watch. Yes, Andy,
Not
you
literally
watch
nobody. I mean, you guys.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll do a sing-along of the theme after. But the point is, all the time people will tweet at Sean Ryan, one of the executive producers of the show who created The Shield, and say, man, I just found Terriers on Netflix. It's so awesome. Why isn't it around anymore? And Sean will write back, I'm glad you liked it. It's not around because you didn't watch it until it was on Netflix.
There you go. That may be the thing. That may be the one thing that, this idea of a generation of people who have now grown up with broadband access to internet and streaming and have never known a world that didn't exist without a DVR or without time shifting in some ways. That move toward streaming might be the thing that gets the universe to stop expanding and maybe contract a little bit.
Perhaps.
It's up to you guys. Further? One more question?
We have time for one more, so if someone has a really good one.
Ooh, in the corner.
All right, in the corner over there.
You mentioned the satisfaction of an ending. Do you think more limited series could solve peak TV crisis?
I think that's good. What we're seeing now is shorter runs. We're seeing anthology shows because there's a lot of shows that if Homeland ends after one season, with Brody blowing himself up, that goes down as one of the great seasons of TV of all time. If Dexter, which I think I write about in the book, runs 2 or 3 years, Dexter goes down as an all-time great show. Instead, it stuck around for 8 years and he became a lumberjack. Also a true story.
Coming this fall on Showtime, Lumberjack.
There's definite endings are good, and it's. The TV business model was originally you run and you stay on the air as long as you are profitable. It doesn't matter if you've run out of story. The creators of the showrunners of Lost had to argue with ABC to get them to let them end the show because they knew that they were going to run out of material eventually. Battlestar Galactica was the same way with Sci-Fi, and now there's more flexibility in that way. But there's still a lot of shows that stick around. At TCA the other day, Fox paneled a revival of Prison Break. Prison Break ran 4 years. They broke out of the prison at the end of the first one.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's really not Prison Break anymore. It's just sort of like running around.
In one of the later seasons, they broke into a new prison just so they could break out of it.
Well, I think, that gets to a good example of sort of like there were 13 episodes of Faulty Towers, and people still talk about it and as if it was this legendary, and it is. There are 13 great episodes.
And he took 5 years off in between making them. He just made 6, said, all right, I don't have any more ideas, maybe I'll come back later, and then he did, and that was it.
And that was kind of how the British model worked for a long time. And I think, again, with the explosion of the internet, explosion of blog culture and writing about television and sharing ideas and all that stuff, you get something like Black Mirror or something that comes and it's this brilliant thing that all of a sudden we all know about. Yep. And it's another show I was in, you guys. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But it's that I think we've learned something about. We as a sort of American television learned something from the Brits in that sense of like that can work.
Yep. And I think TV, I remember like in the 90s when I started this, like a lot of American TV producers were so envious of the British for that kind of freedom. And now American TV creators have virtually every freedom they ever could have imagined, and some that they couldn't. Like the idea that you're going to make a show and release the whole season at once, and people can all watch it all at once and shut out the rest of the world to just immerse themselves in the story you've told over a day. It's like that's a miracle. That's the tablets being brought down from the mountain.
And as to sort of wrap it all up, how do you write about a full season of television coming out, like without spoiling it for people? Like, what episode are you on of Stranger Things? Yeah. Well, I'm on 3, and I have to watch all of them because I have to write about it.
It's hard. I mean, I sort of made my name writing like weekly episode recaps of things like Mad Men, and that you can't really do that for streaming shows. I've tried a couple times, like with Orange is the New Black. I would review it like 2 episodes a week for about 6 or 7 weeks after it debuted, and by the time you get 3 weeks in, all the commenters are saying, all right, I've forgotten every detail about the episode you're on because I watched it the weekend it debuted. And so eventually what I did was I write 2 things. I write it before it debuts, and then after I've seen all the episodes, I write a second thing with spoilers to varying degrees about what happened over the course of these episodes. And like I just leave it there, and it's like you can read that whenever you're done. So whenever you finish Kimmy Schmidt's season 2, you can
Excellent, you guys.
You can read all about how, like, John Hamm's face is upside down in an episode. Spoiler. But you don't have to read it until then. And so, like, I find those pieces, like, when we actually, like, analyze my traffic, those pieces...
That sounds painful.
I hate talking about traffic and brands and all these other things that are now part of the job, but... Those pieces have, people keep coming back to them months later, years later, because suddenly, like, someone finally watched The Killing, and they want to read what I had to say about the end of The Killing.
Yeah. Well, we as, I think, human beings like to get together in groups and talk about things and share ideas, and I think this has been a perfect example of that. On that note, I will say thank you for being here, and I will say thank you to you for being here.
And I would like to
Alan Sepinwall.
And I would like to say thank you to John Hamm for being here.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.